Shall we start? Okay, so good morning to this breakout session, and this session is entitled Peer Influence and Youth Risk Behavior. So as a reminder, we ask that you complete an evaluation sheet at the conclusion of this session, and there are forms on each table. And in the interest of time, we ask that you hold all questions until after the last panelist is done presenting. And we encourage you to write down any questions you may have during our presentations. And then my name is Dr. Chen. I'm with Associate Professor at New York Medical College. I'm with working on federal grants, and my specialty is in adults and risk behavior. And then, so now let me introduce today's speaker. The first speaker is Dr. MaryPhifer. She serves as a lead sexual health facilitator at Program Reach, which is a federally funded reputation study. She provides professional development, staff supervision, and training for health educators. She formerly worked as a program director at Westchester County Allied Health School. She has managed 20 instructors and approximately 500 students. And our second speaker is Dr. LuisRodriguez, who is a graduate of New York Medical College with MD degree, and his specialization is obstetrics and gynecology. And then he also served at Long Island College Hospital and affiliated with the Downtown Medical Center. And he practiced for over 28 years, which includes service to pregnant adolescents. He retired in 2008 and pursued further formal academic education, and he received his master's degree in New York Medical College, and he just completed his doctoral degree at New York Medical College as well. And our last and third speaker for this session is Dr. Jarvis Knott. He is an assistant professor in the College of Public Health, Department of Healthcare Administration, and he has over 13 years as a healthcare administrator, as a respiratory therapist, and a healthcare leadership in higher education as a former chair and associate professor of health science at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Let's just, each speaker will have 20 minutes, and I'd like you to hold your Q&A session at the end. Thank you. Let's welcome our first speaker.
Good morning, everyone, again. I will be speaking to you on peer influence on sexual risk and other behavior. And today I hope to define peer influence and its role in adolescent health, to review the influences of peer pressure and media on adolescent sexual risk and other behaviors, to identify the cluster of adolescent risky behaviors typically found to influence one another, and to increase awareness about the importance of risk avoidance strategies for adolescent risky behaviors. And we're going to begin the discussion by looking at Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. You can see it looks like steps. And this is because in life he believed that everyone must go through 8 stages stepwise, increasing in complexity. And we will begin, I will just briefly explain each one. The first one, the trust versus mistrust in the infant, is seen because the infant, totally dependent on their caregiver, has to rely on their affection and their care, totally. So if that is unreliable, they could develop mistrust. And then the second stage, the autonomy versus shame and doubt, this is when toddlers, they learn self-sufficiency. So the activities of feeding themselves, walking, talking, and toileting. And if this particular, if these activities are not achieved by the toddlers, they can doubt their own ability. And this is the earliest stage where you can see self-esteem and autonomy is introduced into their lives. So toddlers are about 2 years old, as you know. The third stage, the initiative versus guilt, that is when the preschooler will come up with the most creative things. They can build a fortress, they can have a tea party, they can learn social and interactive skills. And their vocabulary is increasing, so they're exploring the world on their own terms. And of course, asking that proverbial question, but why? But why? But why? And sometimes frustrating, but this is how they learn. So if they don't achieve competency or an understanding in this area, then they can have feelings of guilt. And then stage 4, where we see the grade schooler, that's the industry versus inferiority. This is when the students are in school, they're learning, they're trying to cope with the demands of school, and they're becoming more aware of their strengths and weaknesses as compared to their colleagues. So successful completion of this stage would increase their self-esteem, but if they don't successfully complete this stage, then that can also cause inferiority. So when Erickson developed these steps, each step builds on the previous step. So if a step was not achieved to its fullest, then there could be a deficiency in the person's personality. And the one step that we're going to focus on is the identity versus role confusion. I'm sorry. It's also called identity crisis. That's what I was going to say. And this is the critical transition that a teenager goes through, and they're moving from childhood to adulthood. And their basic question is, who am I? How do I fit into this world? And this lasts for approximately 6 years of them struggling to find a sense of self and find their own identity. And they do this through a series of testing and experimental and experimenting in different things. And you will hear a lot more about this later this afternoon, so my focus is on the risk behaviors. But in addition, in the teenage years, they're also going through puberty, the fun time of life, right? Their bodies are changing, their emotions are changing, and they're becoming more sexually aware of their bodies. So if the adolescent does not experience success in this step, then they will experience role confusion because they have a weak sense of who they are and who they want to become in the world as an adult. And in 1977, Albert Bandura, another psychologist, he described the social learning theory. And he believed that behavior is learned from the environment and that children are constant learners and constantly processing information to become imitators. So children and adolescents, they learn by observing and they imitate what they see, especially when these behaviors seem realistic or they're rewarded. So just what is self-efficacy and self-esteem? We already mentioned in stage 2, this is the first inkling of self-esteem. And Bandura, in 1997, he defined self-efficacy as a person's belief about his or her abilities to take the actions necessary to perform a behavior successfully. And then self-esteem, on the other hand, is how one sees themselves. Do they value themselves? And because self-efficacy is typically gained by personal experiences and observations of other people, the adolescent's decisions are generally made under conditions of emotional arousal, whether it's positive or negative. They just get excited because someone else may be excited. And these decisions are usually made in peer groups. And peer groups, as you know, they're small groups of close friends that are similar in age and that participate in similar activities. However, prior to joining a peer group, a person enters into a process known as peer selection. And this is when an individual elects to join a group because that group demonstrates similar behaviors. So understanding how adolescents' health risk behaviors may arise from social norms within the peer context is critical to achieving positive health outcomes. So, once a peer group is chosen through the peer selection process, then peer influence can play a role. So the heightened importance of peer influence is a hallmark of adolescent psychosocial functioning. And peer influence we have is defined as the influence of peers to change the thinking or the behavior of individuals in their peer group based on perceptions of friendship. And the peer influence can be both positive and negative. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to talk about the mechanisms of peer influence, the why and the how. War, in his book entitled Companions in Crime, described the three mechanisms of peer influence. And one is avoiding ridicule by others in the peer group. Essentially, the individual establishes their own identity independent of their family. So they're making their identity is within the peer group. The second mechanism is demonstration of loyalty. And they do this by conforming to others around them. And this conformity is thought by the individual to seal the friendship and to seal the fact that they're accepted into this group. And sometimes the loyalty to the friends can supersede even the law. And you'll see that in negative risk behaviors. And the last mechanism is status. And this refers to the prestige or the respect within a peer group that the individual experiences. So the peer groups, generally, they're maintained by peer influence because the individuals within the group want to be accepted. They want to be loyal to something that's different than their normal family. And they value the status that the group gives. And peer pressure can play a role here, and it's basically when the group insists on a particular behavior in an activity, not necessarily, there's like a fine line between peer influence versus the peer pressure. So the high-risk behaviors that have been noted by the Center for Disease Control, they're delinquency, substance use, violence, and sexual risk behaviors. And you've heard these statistics already in Dr. Foley's talk. So I will just briefly go over them. 46.8% of students have ever had sexual intercourse, and 22.4% drank alcohol or used drugs prior to the last sexual encounter. And similar to Dr. Foley's talk, this same study showed that 15% of the students that had sexual intercourse with 4 or more partners, and this sexual exposure chart shows that on your left-hand side, the number of sexual partners, if that's just 4 that the person had, they've actually been exposed to 15 people and their risks. So their risk of infection and their risk of sexually transmitted infection. And again, with the youth risk behavioral surveillance study, 34.9% drank alcohol on at least one day during the 30 days before the survey, and 20.8% of the students had 5 or more drinks. So the binge drinking is 20.8%. And then the staggering statistic, all of these are staggering, but the 22.1% that was offered, sold, or given an illegal substance on school grounds. And we did touch a little bit about on mental health risk in Dr. Foley's talk as well. And there was a national study done with 7th graders to examine the association between multiple risk behaviors and current depressive symptoms by gender. And the results indicated that involvement in adolescent risk behaviors was associated with the increased odds of depressive symptoms in both the male and the female when compared to those who abstained or did not partake in the risk behaviors. Those risk behaviors we've discussed: alcohol, drugs, and sexual activity. So looking specifically at peer influence and sexual risk behaviors, a study was done entitled Trajectories of Sexual Risk from Middle Adolescent to Early Adulthood. And approximately 1,100 students from the Children of the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth dataset were separated into groups based on their levels of risk. And when compared to the adolescents in the low-risk groups, the individuals in all the other groups, the high-risk groups, were reported to use substance abuse, did report substance abuse and more negative peer pressure. And dating violence and sexual risk behavior is something sometimes overlooked. And I just wanted to bring it to our attention. According to the 2013 YRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Study, among the 73.9% of students nationwide who dated or went out with someone during the 12 months of the survey, 10.3% of those students reported being hit, slapped into something, or injured with an object or weapon on purpose by that person that they were dating or went out on a date with. And 10.4% of students had been kissed, touched, or physically forced to have sexual intercourse when they did not want to by the person that they were dating during the 12 months before the survey. And the super peer. Dr. Foley also mentioned this. The super peer is the media and social media. The Kaiser Foundation performed a study just looking at media usage in the 8 to 18-year-old population and found out that through the various platforms, whether it was videos, music, television, laptop, tablet, most students in those age groups viewed television or music videos a total of 10 hours per day. And they also found that the television shows that they watched that were geared towards teens actually had more sexual content than the adult-oriented shows. So taking into account Bandura's social learning theory, then the teenagers are at risk of modeling and imitating the negative risk behaviors. But all is not lost, because peer influence can be positive. Adolescents with a positive self-concept and self-worth will be less likely to be easily swayed to others' negative behaviors. So it is essential, as Dr. Foley was saying, that they have a positive role model. Parents, teachers, counselors, anyone that is involved in helping students, they can forge great relationships, and this can be a venue through which the teens can feel valued and where they can develop positive views about themselves. So the Search Institute in the 90s identified 40 developmental assets. And these have been used by many programs as the building blocks for healthy development for young people. They've identified external assets and internal assets. The external assets deal with a support system, an empowerment, and an expectation of the teens, whereas the internal assets deal with them, the actual teen, having a commitment to learning and a positive identity. And the Search Institute has researched over 4 million students nationwide. And this is one of their graphs here. And it shows that the number of assets that they have, the higher the number of assets that they have, the lower risk they have for problem with alcohol use, violence, illicit drug use, and sexual activity. And then this last slide, it shows that when we allow the students to help them to gain the personal assets to build a healthy outcome for their lives, we'll see that they can become great leaders and exhibit value in diversity, as you can see over in your left of the slide. It shows that the students who value diversity and who exhibit leadership have the highest assets. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Rodriguez. He will be talking about alcohol and illicit drug use in the adolescent population.
Good morning. My presentation is entitled Alcohol and Illicit Drug Use in the Adolescent Population. I am not going to go into theory because Dr. Pfeiffer so eloquently presented the theory of, especially of crisis identity. But I'm going to concentrate on alcohol . I'm going to be concentrating on alcohol and illicit drugs in terms of statistics, which are very, very impressive. Alcohol continues to be the drug of choice of our teens in the 9th through the 12th grade. Adolescent drinking has far-reaching consequences to the physical and mental health of our youth, which results in a leading community, public health, and safety problem. This chart represents alcohol as a drug of choice of teenagers when compared to cigarettes and marijuana usage back in 2005, with an overall US usage of 33.6% among adolescents. What has happened since then? To answer this question, I refer to the National Youth Risk Behavior Survey of 2013. It monitors priority health risk behaviors that contribute to the leading causes of death, disability, and social problems among youth and adults in the United States. The survey is conducted every 2 years by the CDC and provides data representative of 9th to 12th grade. Now, this data is based on 9th to 12th grade students in public and private schools throughout the United States. The YRSB 2013 2013 statistics demonstrate that 66.2% of U.S. 9 to 12th grade students have had at least one alcohol drink during their lifetime. By looking at the graph, when one goes grade by grade from the 9th through the 12th grade, there is an increase in exposure to alcohol, where 56.6% of 9th graders have already tried it, and by the 12th grade, it reaches 75.6%, an increase of 20% while in high school. We were able to see in the previous graph the high prevalence of alcohol exposure already in the 9th grade. Of interest is the question, how many of them had drank alcohol prior to the age of 13? By looking at this graph, overall, 18.6% said they had. But of more interest, when one looks at the 12th graders, only 14.7% answered yes, yet 22.2% of 9th graders answer yes. This difference of 7.5% suggests that our pre-teenagers being exposed to alcohol is increasing. Prevalence of alcohol use in 2013 by teenagers in the United States was 34.9%, which when compared to the 2005 graph shown previously, it has increased. In New York State in 2013, 32.5% of 9 to 12th graders admitted to having had at least one drink in the last 30 days prior to the survey. Interestingly, the difference between males and females was just 0.8%, suggesting a similar trend in both sexes. Further, an impressive 18.4% of New York State 9 to 12 graders had had 5 or more drinks of alcohol in a row within a couple of hours on at least one day during the 30 days before the survey. There was only a 3% difference between males and females, suggesting that females also use alcohol similar to male levels. Many adolescents, we're bringing it home now to our counties. Many adolescents drive motor vehicles under the influence of alcohol, but are lucky not to be stopped by the authorities. But for those that are stopped, the rate per 10,000 arrests for young adults ages 16 to 21 years driving while intoxicated in 2013 was 22.4 in Westchester County, 23.7 in Rockland County, and 43.0 in Dutchess County. Of interest is how can this affect our adolescents in terms of their grades at school? So our youth academic school grades are affected as demonstrated by this graph. In each of the categories, as the percentage of students engaged in the cited behavior increase, the grades for these students decrease. Each year, approximately 5,000 young people under the age of 21 die as a result of underage drinking. This includes about 1,900 deaths from motor vehicle crashes. Now, can you imagine if you, as an adult, or a parent, a grandparent, you are on the other car? It involves you. Marijuana is the illicit drug of choice among teenagers. Teens having used marijuana one or more times during their life in the US was 40.7%. The chart shows that 9th graders' exposure to marijuana was 30.1%, but 12th graders, 48.6%, an increase of 18.5%, suggesting an increased exposure as the teen ages. Teenagers that try marijuana before age 13 for the first time was 8.6% overall in the United States and 7.3% in New York State. There's a greater number of exposure, 9.8% in the US at the 9th grade level when compared to the 6.2% of the 12th graders, suggesting an increased exposure of 3.6% at the lower grade. The use of marijuana one or more times during the 30 days before the survey was 21.4% in New York State and 23.4% in the United States. In the New York State, 13.5% of 9th graders currently use marijuana and 32.2% of 12th graders, so that means an increase of 18.7% while in the high school years. This is just a slide demonstrating cocaine with its many detrimental effects. The graph shows that 7.1% of 12th graders in the US have used some form of cocaine, crack, powder, or freebase, that's the names as you know, during their lifetime on one or more occasions, and 4.4% of 9th graders, an increase of 2.7%. Ecstasy can cause strokes, seizures, anxiety, and death. Let's look at the statistics. In New York State, 7.1% of 12th graders and 4.7% of 9th graders use ecstasy, an increase of 2.4%, again, as in the overall US percentage, suggesting an increased usage as the teenager increases in age. Again, the chart on having used ecstasy at least one or more times demonstrate an increase in the 9th grade of 4.0% to 8.6% in the 12th grade. It doubles while in the high school years. However, when we look at New York State, it actually triples during the high school years. Heroin and its effect